For more than half a century, engineers all over the world chased a single, almost mad dream in the science of flight. An engine powered not by gently burning its fuel, but by exploding it. By harnessing a real, violent detonation, a controlled blast happening over and over, and riding that explosion to push a craft faster than almost anything with wings has ever flown. It was one of the great holy grails of engineering, and it stayed a dream for one simple reason. It seemed impossible to control. A detonation is, by its very nature, wild and unstable. A shockwave, the exact thing every engine ever built is designed to avoid. Taming it, holding a continuous explosion perfectly steady and making it push instead of destroy, was considered by many to be somewhere between fiendishly hard and flatly impossible. The best minds in the West chased it for decades. And then a team in China announced that they had done it, that they had built an engine that rides a standing explosion to fly at 9 times the speed of sound, burning ordinary cheap jet fuel, fast enough in principle to cross the entire planet in about 2 hours. Tonight I am going to show you what this impossible engine really is, why the whole world wanted it so badly, and the very large dose of honesty you need so that you understand exactly what China has, and has not, actually done. Let me start with why an exploding engine is such a tantalizing prize, because once you understand it, the whole race makes sense. Think about the engines we use today, in a jet or a rocket. They work by burning fuel in a steady, controlled flame. It is a relatively calm, continuous fire, and it works, but it leaves a lot of energy on the table. Now, a detonation is something else entirely. A detonation is a supersonic explosion, a blast wave that rips through the fuel and burns it almost instantly, releasing its energy far more violently and, crucially, far more efficiently than a gentle flame ever could. So here is the dream. If you could somehow capture that explosion, if you could harness a detonation and aim it, you would get an engine that is dramatically more powerful and more fuel efficient, with fewer moving parts, than anything burning fuel the slow way. It is, on paper, a better way to make thrust than almost anything we use today. The prize was enormous. That is why everyone wanted it. But the prize came wrapped in a nightmare, and the nightmare was control. An explosion does not want to sit still and behave. It wants to blast outward, chaotically, and then it is gone, and you have to create another one, and another, thousands of times a second, each one perfectly placed, or the whole thing tears itself apart, or simply sputters out. For decades, that instability was the wall. Scientists could make detonations, of course. What they could not do was tame one, hold it in place, and make it run smoothly and continuously enough to reliably power a flying machine. It was like trying to balance a spinning knife on its point, forever. Many concluded it was simply too unruly to ever be practical. And that is the wall that a Chinese team set out to break. Here is the clever idea at the heart of China's approach, and it is genuinely beautiful. Instead of chasing the explosion around, trying to control something that moves, they found a way to hold the explosion still. They shaped the inside of the engine and the flow of air rushing through it so precisely that the detonation wave locks into one fixed position and simply stays there, a standing explosion, burning continuously in place, while hypersonic air screams through it. Picture a flame that does not flicker or move, frozen at one spot, except this flame is a controlled blast. By making the explosion stand still, they turned the impossible, unstable nightmare into something steady enough to actually harness. And in one of the most powerful hypersonic wind tunnels on Earth, a machine that is itself a major Chinese achievement, they tested this engine and reported that it reached 9 times the speed of sound, running on the same kind of ordinary jet fuel that airliners use today. If you want to watch the walls that engineers everywhere called permanent get pushed over one by one, then subscribe to Sinova, because tracking these breakthroughs and telling you honestly what is real and what is hype is exactly what this channel exists to do. Now let me show you that this was not a one-time trick. Because since that first stunning claim, China has kept pushing, and the tests have kept coming. More recent experiments have gone after the hardest part of all, making the tamed explosion last longer. In one earlier test, A team held a detonation for just a tiny fraction of a second, a mere blink. Then, in a later experiment, another Chinese group reported stretching that steady burnout to more than 2 full seconds. Using standard aviation kerosene, under conditions meant to simulate flight at 8 times the speed of sound, high up in the thin air of the upper atmosphere. And that detail about the fuel matters far more than it sounds. Many earlier attempts at engines this fast relied on exotic hydrogen, which is a nightmare to store, chill, and carry safely. An engine that reaches these blistering speeds on the same cheap, dense, ordinary kerosene that normal airliners already burn is enormously closer to something you could one day actually build and use in the real world, rather than a fragile laboratory curiosity. Now, 2 seconds might not sound like much, but going from a flicker of a fraction of a second to a sustained burn of 2 full seconds is an enormous leap in a field this brutally difficult. Each new test holds the impossible explosion steady a little longer and a little more controllably than the last. The trend line points in one unmistakable direction. The thing the world said could never be controlled is being controlled, in China. And there is more than one way to try to tame the blast, which is why this feels less like a single lucky trick and more like a determined hunt from several directions at once. Alongside the standing explosion I just described, engineers, in China and elsewhere, are chasing a close cousin of it, an engine in which the detonation chases its own tail endlessly around a circular track, a blast wave spinning continuously, thousands of times every second. China has been testing that spinning version too. When a country attacks the same impossible problem from 2 or 3 different angles at the same time, it is a sign of serious intent and of serious resources being poured in behind it. And it is worth pausing on that wind tunnel for a moment, because it hides a second Chinese achievement that most people miss entirely. To test an engine at 9 times the speed of sound without ever leaving the ground, you first need a machine that can recreate those savage hypersonic conditions, even if only for a flash of time. Building such a machine is itself one of the hardest challenges in all of aerospace. And the same generation of Chinese scientists behind these engines also built some of the most capable hypersonic wind tunnels in the world, able to reproduce the searing conditions of flight at many times the speed of sound for a precious sliver of a second. So China did not merely design a radical new engine, it also built the extraordinary tools required to test it. When you own the test track as well as the race car, you can learn and improve faster than rivals who have to wait in line for someone else's equipment. And you might reasonably ask, why does this matter so much? Why pour a nation's brilliance into an exploding engine? The answer is that this technology is the master key to true hypersonic flight, and hypersonic flight is the next great high ground of both travel and war. An engine like this could power aircraft and missiles that fly so blisteringly fast that the defenses of today simply cannot react in time to stop them. And, far more peacefully, the same breakthrough could one day lead to passenger aircraft that cross the entire globe in about the time it takes to watch a couple of movies, turning a brutal 15-hour flight into a hop of 2. Whoever masters the engine that makes hypersonic flight practical and affordable holds one of the most valuable technologies of the coming century, in the skies above both the battlefield and the airport. The stakes could hardly be higher, which is exactly why the smartest engineers on Earth have been chasing this for 2 generations. Now here is the rehook, the twist that makes this story different from almost every other one on this channel. Usually, the China story goes like this. The West invents something brilliant, and then China outbuilds everyone and takes over making it. But this one is different, and that difference is the whole point. Here, China is claiming to be first at the invention itself, at the very frontier of the science, not just the factory floor. It is planting its flag on the cutting edge of one of the hardest problems in all of engineering and saying, "We got here first." If that claim holds up, it marks a profound shift, from China as the world's workshop to China as one of the world's leading laboratories. That is a far more unsettling idea to the West than any factory ever could be. But now I owe you the honesty, and on this topic it matters more than on any other, because this entire field is absolutely drowning in hype, and I refuse to sell you a fantasy. So listen very carefully. These engines are not flying anywhere. Nobody has boarded an aircraft powered by one of them. There is no hypersonic airliner, no finished weapon that you can point to. What China has actually done is run experiments, genuinely brilliant experiments, on test benches and inside wind tunnels. In those tests, the engine itself sits perfectly still, bolted down, while a machine blasts super-fast air over it for a few seconds at most. That dazzling figure of 9 times the speed of sound, and the even wilder talk you may see of 16 times the speed of sound, comes from these tunnel tests and computer simulations, not from a real vehicle streaking across a real sky. And the leap from a 2-second success on a test bench to an engine that can push an actual aircraft through an actual journey, for minutes or hours, is a mountain so tall that nobody on Earth, China included, has come close to climbing it yet. And there is more honesty you deserve. China is not alone in this, not by a long way. The United States, through its space agency and its military, has been deep in detonation engine research for decades, and has its own serious programs and its own real progress. In fact, if you want to be strict about who flew first, it was an American team that briefly got a crude, primitive version of a detonation engine into the air many years ago in a small experimental aircraft for just a few seconds. So the raw idea of flying on a detonation is not itself uniquely Chinese at all. What China is claiming is leadership in a far more advanced and more useful form of it, the steady, standing detonation at hypersonic speed, which is a much harder and much more valuable target. This is a race with several serious runners, not a solo victory lap. On top of that, some of these headline-grabbing world-first claims are difficult to verify independently, because this kind of work sits right on the blurry edge between open science and secret military research, where boasts are common and hard proof is scarce. So when you see a number like 16 times the speed of sound splashed across a headline, treat it with real caution. What is solid and what is genuinely impressive is narrower but still remarkable. China is publishing real, serious, world-class research on one of the most difficult challenges in all of engineering. It is doing it openly in scientific journals, and it is moving fast. That alone is enough to make the rest of the world sit up, without any need for the wild exaggerations layered on top. So let me leave you with the honest and still striking picture. There is an engine that runs on a tamed, standing explosion, an idea the world spent 50 years calling somewhere between fiendishly hard and impossible. And a team in China has, in the controlled world of the laboratory, shown that the impossible part, holding that explosion steady and making it push, can actually be done, and can be stretched out longer and longer with each new test. It is not a finished aircraft. It is not a weapon in the sky. It is not the science fiction machine the loudest headlines promise. But it is a real and serious step toward one of the greatest prizes in the history of flight, taken at the frontier of invention rather than the factory floor, and taken, this time, in China. If the day ever comes when we cross the planet in 2 hours, or when a missile flies faster than anything can catch, it may trace its lineage back to these quiet, violent little experiments. If you want to keep watching China push at the walls the world calls permanent, at the frontier of science itself, and not just manufacturing, then subscribe to Sonova, and the next time someone tells you a thing is simply impossible, remember the standing explosion, and ask them how sure they really are.